to be educated, but I'm so frustrated.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Music Mindset channel. I want to shout out to the viewers who keep watching, the subscribers and the members on this channel. I appreciate you guys and stuff like that. And this is a channel for anybody and everybody and all kinds of music. So I hope you enjoy. Tonight, we're going to get into something a little bit different. The Funk Brothers. Yeah, the Funk.
Yeah, I know about those guys.
You know about them, man?
That's those wrestlers from back in the day, Terry and Dory Funk, right?
Oh man, you went old school for a second there. That old wrestling alliance stuff, you know what I'm talking about? No, I'm not talking about that. We're talking about Motown. We're talking about the musicians who actually made the hits for us in the music world. And that's what we're going to get into it. So let's go, guys. Yeah, y'all. The Funk Brothers were the heartbeat of American music and the greatest hit-making machine in the history of the world. They played on more #1 records than the Beatles, the Beach Boys, the Rolling Stones, and Elvis Presley combined. They were the anonymous titans of a Detroit basement, quietly building the soundtrack of the 20th century while the world cheered for the handsome, dazzling faces standing on the stages. But if you're trying to understand the Funk Brothers as a band, you'll always be confused. They were not a fixed lineup, not a traditional group, not a brand. They were a rotating elite labor force inside a hit factory. Once you understand that Motown operated like an assembly line, everything suddenly makes sense. Musicians rotated in and out based on availability, health, trust, and survival, while the sound stayed consistent because the machine demanded it. And that's why the story of the Funk Brothers isn't just a story about music, it's a story about a heist. A heist carried out by brilliant businessmen who pilfered the talents of great musicians, never allowing them to profit from the music they created, the music that built the Motown empire. These were jazz-trained assassins, musicians who could take a simple 3-chord pop idea and turn it into something timeless, emotional, and alive. They were not just studio players. They were the heartbeat, the engine, the unseen architects behind some of the most iconic records ever made. Now, before we go any further, let's get the name straight. They were never called the Funk Brothers in the beginning. In the early days, they were simply the Motown House Band. No name required. As we've said before on the channel, the word funk was not even being used like that until the late 1960s. And the Funk Brothers name did not solidify until the 1970s. The foundation was laid in 1959, when Berry Gordy started Motown. Gordy needed a sound that could cross over, something that could capture the ears of white teenagers without losing the soul of the neighborhood. To get that sound, Berry left it in the hands of his A&R guy, Mickey Stevenson. He brought him talent straight out of the jazz clubs of Detroit, and these guys were master hitmen on their instruments. The first real core of what would later be called the Funk Brothers was Joe Hunter band leader and piano, James Jamerson on bass, Larry Vita on guitar, Hank Cosby and Mike Terry on saxophone, and Benny Benjamin on drums. Others came and went along the way, but the engine remained intact. Keep in mind, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just where it all started. Many more well-known musicians rotated through the sessions, each contributing to the heartbeat of Motown, but too many to name here. Each man had a role. These were classically trained or jazz-hardened musicians who looked at simple pop songs like nursery rhymes, then reshaped them into symphonies of rhythm and emotion. Bass lines became melodies. Drum parts became conversations. Guitar figures whispered, answered, and pushed the song forward. This was not accidental. This was craft. They worked in a place called the Snake Pit, the basement studio inside that famous house on West Grand Boulevard.
Hitsville, USA was a place where hits were going to be made. Only hits, no flops. My job was to get the hits. And so we tried to create that assembly line approach.
It earned its name from the tangled mass of cables twisting across the floor like a nest of snakes. The room was cramped, hot, and the air was thick with sweat, cheap cigars, and pressure to create. The place was gritty. James Jamerson famously used the same set of heavy gauge strings for years, never cleaning them. But the gunk kept his funk, he said. Between 1959 and 1972, this basement was the engine room of popular music. The musicians were expected to show up at all hours, day or night, to lay down tracks for whoever Berry Gordy put in the booth. If Diana Ross needed a hit, they delivered it. If Marvin Gaye needed a groove, they supplied the pulse. But this is where the grease meets the pan. Berry Gordy was a businessman first. He understood that if the world realized the same small group of musicians were responsible for nearly every hit, those musicians would gain leverage, power, and money. And that could not happen. The truth was simple. The band was the hit, the singers were the faces, but the music sold the records. Most of those stars never played a note on the records that made them famous. So, Gordy kept the machine tightly controlled. Union scale wages were paid, but rarely monitored. At one point, it came down to $10 a song until everything was right, while Motown profits soared and Berry lived like a king. He told them they were family. But families don't stay anonymous, and families don't get treated like interchangeable parts. And still, the machine delivered. Yes, on that hit, the song went to #1 for weeks. But when you bought the record, you didn't see their names anywhere. You saw the artist on the cover.
I've got sunshine on a cloud.
Motown deliberately kept the musicians uncredited, claiming it was to protect the house band from rival labels. In reality, it protected Motown's control. But that practice ended with Marvin Gaye's What's Going On in 1971. Gaye demanded full creative control, including producing the album himself and listing the credits for the Funk Brothers. This public acknowledgement finally exposed the musicians who had played on hundreds of hits for over a decade and never acknowledged. But that didn't stop the pressure they had always dealt with. Motown kept a close eye on its musicians. Loyalty was enforced. If someone got caught playing sessions for another label to make extra grocery money, fines followed, and firing was always on the table. The message was clear. You belong to the factory. And yet, they still slipped out at night because they had families to feed, sneaking around like criminals while being the most heard musicians on the planet. But by the late 1960s, the pressure had reached a breaking point. Man, Detroit was burning. In 1967, a police raid ignited one of the largest civil uprisings in American history. The city erupted, fires spread, gunshots echoed. National Guard troops and tanks rolled through the streets. And while all of that chaos unfolded above ground, the Funk Brothers were underground in the snake pit, locked in the basement, trying to finish sessions while the city burned around them. Smoke filled the air. Sirens screamed outside.
We got one of our guys to go stand outside the studio and watch the flames while we finished the session, hoping that they weren't moving that fast and we could get done. So the guys watching the flames, and it was creeping up, and we got our tapes, finished the session, and we got out of there.
When they finally did, Detroit was changed, and so were they. They had just lived through a moment where survival mattered more than music, yet they were still expected to create joy, polish, and perfection for the world. From that point on, there was a quiet irony hanging over everything they played, making some of the greatest, happiest music ever recorded while knowing firsthand how fragile everything really was. At the same time, the human cost was mounting. The bass that reshaped modern music was carrying a man battling exhaustion and alcohol. The drum pulse that defined Motown was coming from a body breaking down. Families were growing, bills were stacking up, and the singers they backed were becoming global icons while the men who built the sound remained invisible. Resentment simmered beneath the hits. These musicians worked out arrangements. They corrected singers. They shaped the feel and direction of songs in real time. They were producers in every sense except credit and pay. They proved it again and again. Take a simple song, strip it down, and suddenly it becomes dark, moody, haunting. That was the machine working at full power. Then came the day that most saw as a betrayal. In 1972, Berry Gordy moved Motown to Los Angeles. And he didn't sit the musicians down. He didn't thank them. Some musicians literally showed up to the studio for a scheduled session only to find a closed sign or a padlocked door. Many found out through rumors and phone calls. After more than a decade of loyalty and hundreds of hits, the factory moved west, and the workforce was left behind in Detroit. The machine survived. The men who built it were scattered. Some tried to follow Motown west, but the network, the culture, and the Detroit magic could not be transported. The brotherhood that built the sound effectively went extinct. The aftermath was painful. Some of these musicians died broke, some died bitter. Jamerson passed away in 1983, feeling forgotten by the industry he helped define. It took until the documentary Standing in the Shadows of Motown for the world to finally look these men in the eye and say thank you. By then, many were already gone. A Grammy finally came decades later, but the question remains, is recognition 40 years late ever enough? And still, the music never stopped. Listen closely and you can hear it everywhere. In hip-hop, in pop, in R&B, in soul. The fingerprints are all over modern music. Ghosts of bass lines, echoes of drum fills. The Funk Brothers were the most important anonymous people to ever live. As of 2026, Jack Ashford, the percussionist who helped shape that sound, is the last surviving member of the original core group. A living reminder of the factory, the heist, and the heartbeat that built Motown. Yeah, man, those are the makers of the real Motown sound, and don't you forget about that like people have throughout history. The Funk Brothers. Hope you appreciate that. Check you out next time on the Music Mindset channel. Thanks.